I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, as we were doing our live show yesterday, our viewers actually were breaking the news to us that Bercow had prevented Theresa May from bringing the deal to a vote for a third time. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly that Bercow prevented Theresa May from doing this. You mentioned in the previous video we did on Brexit, you mentioned it, that Theresa May bringing the vote to the House over and over again was actually, and correct me once again if I'm wrong, was actually not legal to begin with, or at least not part of the legal processes for the House of Commons to follow. So correct me if I was wrong on any of the things that I said, and get into the story as to what Bercow did and as to May continuously bringing the deal to the House.
Right. First of all, you're absolutely right in all you said, but let me fill in a few gaps. John Bercow is the Speaker of the House of Commons. He is the person who obviously impartially runs debates, or is supposed to impartially run debates. So he makes sure that when debates happen in the House of Commons, everybody gets a fair say, and it's not entirely dominated by the government or by the opposition. And at the same time, he is also the keeper of the rules. So by tradition, it is the Speaker of the House of Commons, who at the moment is John Bercow, who decides what the rules are, or who rather upholds the rules, which, as is traditional in England, have been decided by precedent, developed over a very long time, over the many, many centuries over which the British Parliament, the oldest existing parliament in the world, has been in existence. I mean, the British Parliament goes back to the 13th century, so it's not surprising that there are lots of rules, and some of these are very old. Now, this particular rule that John Bercow upheld yesterday on Monday is one of the best established and best known. I say this because there's been some ridicule, because supposedly John Bercow referred to some arcane law which supposedly was created in the 17th century, and he's been somewhat, criticized for this. In fact, it is one of the best established rules of procedure in the House of Commons, so well established that though I am not an MP and have never worked in the House of Commons, even I had heard of it. This rule says that the government cannot propose to the House of Commons in the same session something which the House of Commons has previously rejected. The reason that rule exists is to prevent the government doing exactly what Theresa May has been doing over the last couple of weeks, which is coming back to the House of Commons and presenting the same deal or bill which has been rejected by the House of Commons in big votes, and putting it to the House of Commons again and again and again, and putting immense pressure on MPs to get them to accept that which they have previously rejected. That has always been acknowledged to be a gross abuse of parliamentary procedure, and John Bercow was absolutely right on Monday when he finally put his foot down and said to Theresa May, this is illegal, it is contrary to House of Commons procedure, and you cannot do it. So the effect is that Theresa May cannot put her deal, that deal which was rejected in January, by 230 votes, and which was again rejected a few weeks ago by the House of Commons by 149 votes. She cannot come along and bring it again to the House of Commons a third time, making all sorts of threats to put off Brexit indefinitely if it is not passed.
So what does this mean, practically speaking, and especially in relation to the video we did last week, where, we said that, okay, Theresa May is essentially keeping the UK in the EU by offering two choices: either a long extension, say a 6-month all the way to a 2-year extension, or vote for my terrible, awful deal for the UK leaving the EU. Now that I imagine that deal now, Theresa May forcing the MPs to vote on her deal that she negotiated with the European Union, that is off the table now, and we're just looking at discussing an extension, or is something else in play?
Right. I think before we go on, I think this is the point where I have to make my own opinions clear, because unless I do, I don't think I'm going to explain this properly. My own clear view is that these two options that Theresa May was offering, which is either her absolutely terrible deal or no Brexit at all, if I had had a vote on this, I would have voted against her terrible deal. The reason I would have voted against her terrible deal is because I do not regard that deal as any sort of Brexit. As far as I am concerned, it is a phony Brexit which keeps Britain indefinitely in the customs union with the EU, which it cannot leave without the EU's agreement. Rather than accept that, I would rather that we had clarity, have no formal Brexit whatsoever, and accept openly and frankly the reality that referendums in Britain are obviously, apparently not valid, and then we can organise properly in Britain for something like a proper government which can carry out Brexit through. That seems to me a much better option than the other one, which is to be locked in permanently into a phony Brexit arrangement which Britain can never leave. Now, having said that, what is going to happen now? Theresa May cannot put this deal forward. I mean, she's prevented from doing so. There have been all sorts of weird proposals that she prorogues Parliament, involves the Queen in having a new session, and brings her proposal back that way. I think all these ideas are disastrous, and I suspect that she would encounter intense opposition within her own party and in Parliament if she was to do something like that. So what I think is going to happen is Theresa May is going to meet the Europeans on the 21st of March. She's going to ask for a long, essentially indefinite extension to try and get something sorted out so that she can bring her deal back. I think that there is a very strong likelihood that the Europeans will agree to that extension. But I think there is also a very real possibility that they will say, Theresa May, you can't get this deal through. What are you asking us for an extension for? You can't give us anything convincing. So why should we agree to an extension at all? And reports I'm hearing from Germany and France suggest that there has indeed been such a hardening of position, and that there is a possibility, I'm not going to put it higher than that the European Council will say no, and that there will be no extension at all, because Theresa May has nothing she can propose to the Europeans that they could realistically grant an extension for. In which case, Britain leaves the European Union on the 29th of March without a deal. So probably a long extension, but possibly a Brexit on the 29th of March without a deal. That second possibility is more likely now than it appeared to be when we last spoke about Brexit a week ago.
All right, so we're back to two options. One option for Theresa May, but two options as to what's going to happen with Brexit. And those two options are, as you summarized it, either a no-deal Brexit, 29th, the UK is out, WTO rules, finished,
yes,
or the EU does decide to grant her that extension, given that every member state also agrees to that extension, correct?
Correct. But let us consider how humiliating that is for Britain. Britain voted to leave the EU. The British Parliament cannot get its act together to promulgate a Brexit. Theresa May, the Prime Minister, has put forward a plan which has failed. So the decision now on whether or not there is going to be a Brexit on the 29th of March or at some future time is no longer going to be made by Britain, whose people voted for Brexit in the June 2016 referendum, but by the European Council, which is going to decide whether or not to grant Britain a Brexit extension or not. That is the humiliation, the debacle that Theresa May and Britain's political class have led Britain into.
Okay, now, Bercow was under fire about a month, maybe a couple of months ago, for past decisions he made with regard to Brexit and with regard to Theresa May's deal that she presented to the House. Remind us what it was that Bercow decided back then, which was, in essence, kind of breaking the rules of the Parliament, and get us into his motivations as to why all of a sudden it seems that now he is going to be a stickler for the rules.
Right. I think the first thing to say is that I consider John Bercow to be an absolutely disastrous speaker. I think he has been grossly partial throughout these Brexit debates. He's clearly a supporter of Remain. In fact, he barely bothers to conceal it. And he has been consistently following an agenda in the House of Commons, which I don't agree with, not just on Brexit, but on many other issues, and which I don't think a Speaker of the House of Commons, who is supposed to be impartial, should ever be following. Now, what he did a couple of weeks ago was that he allowed certain opposition MPs to propose an amendment to a motion proposed by the government, which was supposed to be, under the rules, unamendable. Now, that motion was, I think, clearly intended to pave the way for a potential second referendum. In the event, it didn't quite work out that way, but there is no doubt at all that Bercow didn't just stretch the rules in that case. He actually broke the rules. He went against the advice of all his law officers in allowing that to happen. And if you wind back and look at our video where we discussed what he did, I very strongly criticized him for it. What he has done this time is he has upheld the rules. And I think the reason he has upheld the rules is not because he is stopping Brexit, as some people are saying. What he is in effect doing is stopping Theresa May's dreadful deal, which in my opinion is not Brexit at all, and which would almost certainly have been defeated if it had been put to a third vote. What he has done is he has upheld a rule of the House of Commons, which is so important and so fundamental that it would have been extremely difficult for him as Speaker to have wished away. So I think that on this occasion, Bercow did something which he had no realistic alternative to do if the rules of the House of Commons were to have any meaning at all.
Doesn't Theresa May have legal counsel and a team of lawyers to have advised her that you just can't continue to bring deals to the House of Commons over and over again? Number one. And number two, can you say that Bercow, who is a Remainer and is not hiding the fact that he's a Remainer, can you say that now he took a decision to uphold the rules, but that decision for him may help the UK stay in the EU when all is said and done?
Right. Let's unpack it. Let's go over those 2 points. Firstly, you're absolutely right. I mean, I come back to what I said. I am not an expert in parliamentary procedure, but even I knew that what Theresa May was doing, which is repeatedly coming back and putting forward the same proposal again and again and again until it passed, was a gross abuse of procedure and a violation of House of Commons rules. If I knew it, then of course the government, Theresa May as Prime Minister, and her legal advisers must have known it also. It speaks volumes for the arrogance of these people and their contempt for Parliament and for the British people that they were so willing to break those rules. And I can only suppose that the reason they thought that Bercow would not uphold the rules in this case is that because of his disastrous record as Speaker, he would be too compromised to do so. I mean, it amazed me. It didn't just amaze me. It upset me deeply that it was happening. And I am frankly relieved that Bercow on this occasion found the courage to stand up and stop it. Now, as to Bercow's motivations, very probably as an arch Remainer, he does indeed hope that by what he did, he will stop Brexit entirely. And we have to be frank and realistic. That is what might indeed happen. But I come back to what I said earlier in our program, which is why I said it. I would rather that we had no Brexit at all than Brexit on Theresa May's terms. I regard that type of Brexit as no Brexit at all. I do not want to see Britain trapped indefinitely in what I consider a customs union prison, which it cannot leave without the EU at all. And if we have clarity for the British people that their political class is prepared to disregard a referendum and treat it with contempt, then better that we should know it and that we as the people of Britain can organise against it than that we be fooled into thinking that a Brexit has happened when it has not. That is my own feeling about this.
2 final points. Okay, so Theresa May, her legal team didn't point this out to her. They were arrogant. God knows why. They didn't understand why you can't bring a deal over and over again to the House of Commons. What about other MPs? What about Labor?
Oh,
How come they didn't make a stink about
oh,
this?
they did. They did. I mean, this is where I think we need to be very clear about this. I mean, Bercow's decision didn't come out of nowhere.
Okay.
Several Labour MPs, as I said, this is a basic fundamental rule. Several Labour MPs got up and pointed out to him that what Theresa May was doing was wrong. And I would add that after he made his decision, Bill Cash, who is a Conservative MP and who is as hardcore a Brexiter and a Leaver as he gets, and who is also, incidentally, an outstanding lawyer, he stood up and said, Bercow, what you have done is right, and I support you. So, I mean, it's absolutely not the case that other people in the House of Commons couldn't see it and didn't see it. It's that the government closed its eyes to it and was arrogant enough to believe that they could just go on breaching the rules as they were doing and get away with it. And frankly, all this talk I'm reading in the media today, in the British media today, about the fact that what Bercow did is supposedly remarkable and original, and that he was dredging up some ancient century rule, is complete nonsense.
Okay, and finally, Alexander, can the EU come to Theresa May on the 21st, come back to her and say, how about Theresa May, you move towards a second referendum? How about that?
Well, of course they can. And I mean, we have to be very clear. I mean, as I said, this is for me the most humiliating part of all of this, because we've now been maneuvered into a situation, not just by Theresa May, but by our entire British political class, where a referendum which the British people voted for Brexit under the slogan, taking back control, has ended up with control passing to the EU, whose council, the EU Council, will now decide whether on the 29th of March we have Brexit or not, and if not, what the terms, what the date of any future Brexit is supposed to be. It is a total debacle. It is a humiliation. It is a disgrace. And anybody in Britain should be furious about it. And I think the next thing we must do in Britain is we must organise politically to make sure that this disaster doesn't happen again, and that all of these people who are in Parliament and in the government who have led us to this disaster meet with the consequences that they deserve.
And politically, that the outcome and the results of that vote do get honored, whether now or 6 months down the line or 2 years down the line,
or at some future time. The word, incidentally, that's coming out of the EU Council is that, as I said, there is some doubt. There is some strong doubt, especially in Germany, about whether it's appropriate to grant any sort of extension at all, because what's the point in doing so if Theresa May has no viable plan? But that if there is going to be an extension, it will be for 9 months and no more than that. Well, we shall see.
All right, we will see. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click the subscribe button down below and click on that notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. Visit the Duran shop, buy a t-shirt, help support the Duran. And in the description box down below, you'll find links to our PayPal and Patreon pages. Please donate to us. That really helps us out a lot. You can also follow the Duran on SoundCloud and on iTunes in audio format. And go to theduran.com to see the articles that Alexander is linking up to. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you once again. Till next time, take care.